Hi everyone, I'm Kaya, and today I am here interviewing Emily Lowan. She is a student at the University of Victoria, and she's studying economics and environmental studies, and she's currently working at the University of Victoria Student Society, and she has previously worked with the Green Party of Canada during the federal election season. So we're going to be chatting with her today. Hi, Emily.
Kaya.
Thanks for joining us. So today she's going to be sharing with us her experience and her perspective on youth participation in leadership and politics and anything else that is relevant relevant to her. So Emily, you are the Director of Campaigns and Community Relations with the University of Victoria's Student Society, or UVSS. Could you explain to us what your responsibilities are in that position?
Many, I guess. I manage about 10 campaigns that work on issues that matter to students and that impact student life. So, for instance, we have a campaign dedicated to ending sexualized violence, improving our transit system, about housing affordability and environmental sustainability projects, such as Divest UVic, which focuses on lobbying the university to remove their investments from fossil fuels. So it's a really diverse portfolio, a lot of issues that I'm working on every day, and it's really thrilling to do this work. I also lead our provincial lobbying efforts, which basically means that I work with other student union representatives to lobby government ministers to grant us funding or make policy improvements on issues that impact students.
Wow, that is quite the job description. Wow. Yeah, so how long have you been sort of tackling all this?
Yeah, so I did actually just start on May 1st of 2020, and it's a one-year term. So I'll be serving as the UVSS director until April 30th of 2021.
Wow. So I was just wondering how the situation has been for you during lockdown and during the university closure, and what challenges that's presented for that position that you're doing right now.
Yeah, so as the director of campaigns and community relations, it's also a big part of my role, to advocate for students and see what challenges they're up against. And I'm sure you can only imagine all the abrupt and really awful changes that students have faced during this transition period. We've had a lot of students face travel bans, all these really fundamental shifts in their lifestyles. Um, Affordability challenges. There is a huge number of students who lost their co-op jobs and those sort of work term placements. It was a really big shock. So I mostly had a role in advocating to the university of financial aid supports and other things that can help support students during this really challenging time.
Yeah, wow. Okay, and what other leadership experience have you had prior to this? Is there anything else that I'm not aware of that you'd like to share? What sort of
Mhm.
sparked your interest in this?
Yeah, it goes back a few years ago, I think. So back in 2016, I decided to join the Institute for Global Solutions program at my high school. Um, and it was just such a fantastic experience. It was sort of my first exposure of what politics really looks like in action. We took a train trip across Canada visiting Parliament Hill. It was just an incredible experience, and it really sparked my passion and interest for politics. And in particular environmental protection and advocacy in that area. Um, and so sort of from there, I started to get involved with the BC and the federal Greens, working as a campaign volunteer for different like election campaigns. Um, Yeah, and another thing that I sort of that really sparked my passion at that young age. I believe I was about 16. I worked on a local get out the vote. I was so discouraged by the low voter turnouts amongst youth and high school students in particular who were of voting age. So at 16, I organized sort of a mini get out the vote campaign at my high school where I organized a bus system that would actually take all our voting age students who would voluntarily get transported to the polls, I guess. So yeah, that was just one thing that I spearheaded on my own that really, I think, launched my interest.
Wow, that's great. So you were mentioning your how that sort of grew your interest in politics. So you became involved with the Green Party of Canada, and you worked as a volunteer campaign coordinator during the federal election season. So how did that come about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually started working on that campaign as a volunteer myself. I started by knocking on doors, making those phone calls to voters, and I really fell in love with having real, meaningful conversations with people about their political perspective and finding ways to forge common ground across the political spectrum. It really, in a lot of ways, it wasn't about winning them over. It was just about finding ways to relate to different voters. And after a few months of being an active volunteer, the campaign manager asked to have me as a paid staff member to coordinate volunteers for the remainder of the campaign. So that was just an incredible experience overall.
That's great. So when was that happened?
Yeah, so that was sort of early to midsummer of last year until the end of October.
Okay,
Mm.
nice. So is there anything that you really took away from that experience that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, something that I noticed coming into the position, I think it's fair to say that our political system is very polarized. We have these perceptions of different political stances and parties that make it a very divisive environment. So as a volunteer coordinator, I made it a priority to coach our volunteers on how to have these productive, empathetic, and respectful political conversations with people on the doorstep. Um, I think, not to sound like entirely cheesy here, but I think that really is like a core part of democracy, and really relating to each other and critically thinking about our political positions and where we have common ground. So that felt like a really incredible like accomplishment to be able to do, to teach people to have these great conversations as like little and as that sounds, and some
No, not at all.
but something that also really excited me about this position is learning how to break down these relatively complex policy ideas into simple and exciting ideas that get people engaged in politics. Um, because you can really get into the weeds, and I think for a lot of young people, politics may seem daunting or like a volatile environment, but it really can be something to build community around.
Yeah, for sure. And you also are studying environmental studies and economics. So how do these leadership roles that you have been able to participate in connect with your studies? How is that sort of leading to where you want to go in the future?
Yeah, so in my degree, I study environmental studies and economics. And a particular area of interest that I'm pursuing is different economic models that are more environmentally and socially restorative. Because under our current economic system, which is very market based, there are just a number of challenges about how we make economic policy and how we value the environment or don't. um, yeah, it's an incredible field, and it's super interesting to me. And I sort of see politics and this field of economics as a necessary intersection. And ultimately, I think having this background will help me be a more informed decision maker and make the really like key choices that will push us towards a more sustainable economy.
That's great. Yeah. So is there anything else about that future career that you want to outline? You were saying that you want to be like a decision maker in do you want to just rephrase that?
Yeah, for sure. So you're just asking if like what my future plans are for
Yeah.
politics and leadership roles?
I think you articulated it a little bit before when we were chatting, and then I think there are just some parts that you didn't quite touch on there.
Hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Um, so I really see myself bringing in the intersection of environmental studies and economics and these more sustainable economic policies into the political arena, because ultimately, like one day I would love to run on a platform where we have this sort of shifted economic policy and view that is really socially restorative and values the environment in a very real and concrete way.
Yeah. So have you received any pushback as a young person involved in leadership, since you've been in these really great opportunities, but really we don't see very much young representation in those areas of work?
Yeah, this is sort of a tricky one. I would say oftentimes in my meetings with, maybe it's municipal councilors or other decision makers, my young age is acknowledged as positive oftentimes, but when we really get into that discussion and into those, I guess, I was just going to say, when we get into the discussion, I often find that I can be talked down to as a young person, or there just is the assumption that I'm not up to speed on the issues, that maybe I don't do my research, when in fact that's very much the opposite case. Um, and the other thing that I've struggled with is there's a lot of misogyny out in the world, and I never really encountered it in such a concrete, explicit way until I sort of entered these leadership roles, because being sort of a shyer, more like smaller woman that's a young age, um, there tends to be sort of an initial shock that I am in a leadership position, particularly from older women, to just say it blatantly. Um, and I think I really, sorry, go
What
ahead.
was that? What was that you just said? It cut out a little bit, just the very last part of it.
Yeah, I was just saying that um, I really struggle with misogynistic comments that are made sort of against me, and that there's a lot of shock when um, I meet people initially that I am in fact a young woman in politics, and that I'm here to guide the discussion and make decisions. Um, so that's definitely been something that's consistently come up in my life and in my leadership roles so far. And I think really when it comes down to it, it is our misogyny and our toxic masculinity in a lot of ways. But I think overall, I really rub against our society's collective idea of who a leader is. We have like the authoritative, outspoken, independent leader type. And the fact is I'm slightly more of an introverted person. I'm a young woman, and I just like to guide the discussion and ensure that all voices are being heard. It's just fundamentally different leadership style than what is promoted in our culture. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important to have all of the voices being heard, whether they're a young person, a woman, a minority, just like having that really full range of perspectives. It's so important, because just because you fall into one of those categories doesn't mean that you're less competent. And sometimes that can be an assumption, even if it's not um, even if it's not meant to be like that. A lot of people just have these preconceived assumptions that they don't realize they're making even. And it's something that really needs to change in society and in leadership. So that's really great that you're sort of stepping out and just leading that. I was actually very impressed, and I really admired when I invited you to do the interview that you weren't sure at first. I was actually really impressed by that, because you immediately wanted to step aside and let another person's voice be heard, which is really great. And I think that we need to have everybody's voice be heard, but I think that your experience is really important, and I think that it definitely needs to be shared. So thanks so much for doing this. And to finish, I was just wondering what advice you'd like to give to other young people, other women, just other people in general, regarding leadership and participation in society. If you have any last words you would like to impart, um, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I can only really speak from my own experience here. And, and sort of my experience has been that passion and finding your passion, whatever that may be, is sort of the heart of the process. When I was younger, I think I was thinking about my future career or my future educational path from a monetary perspective, because that's very common in our culture to think of things like what's going to make me money, what's going to afford me this lifestyle. And I'm not saying that's not valid. I've just noticed a definite shift in my overall happiness and sense of fulfillment, finding my passion in politics and environmental sustainability. So I think it's so hard to give advice, right? But I think it's important for young people to really critically examine their political positions. And by that, I mean just sort of following your own thought trains. And if you have a gut instinct to a policy or something, like whether that be a Green New Deal or universal basic income, just sort of thinking about, is this a negative reaction? Is this a positive reaction? How do my parents feel about that? Like, where are these feelings coming from? And really thinking and solidifying your own opinions based on concrete research and facts. Always check your sources, and I think it's just really important as a way to develop yourself and your opinions, to do that soul searching and that research on your own. Um,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
could really go on about this answer, but I'm not going to tell people to go out and vote. I think you should be an informed voter. So I want you to research and look within yourself to find those political opinions, and then do whatever you think is needed at that point. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any thoughts about um, other forms of youth participation in society, why it's important, just as a follow-up to our last question. This is the last probably question.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think youth should really band together on the issues that they care about, and I think that we're honestly with, and that we have to build community and take care of one another, and really hold decision makers and politicians accountable to their mandates and to their duty to protect future generations.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
maybe if I can just summarize really quickly here, um, voting is important. Find out what you're passionate about and find other people who are passionate about that. And I almost just swore like 3 times, but I would say, and then you can really make those important changes.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the advice, your wisdom that you shared with us. No, it's so great. It's so great to hear from you. I think your experience is really great and really relevant, especially as a young woman in politics. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. It was such a pleasure to chat with you today, and all of these questions are really important and meaningful. So